All right, everybody, let's just jump into it. So I'm going to talk about how Christina and I met. Basically, all of these pieces had to fall into place for us to meet, and on my end, I was supposed to leave for basic training in the fall of the year that I graduated high school, and I was supposed to have like the summer off and just enjoy like my last summer, senior summer and whatever, but someone that was leaving for basic training ended up failing their weight portion, because you have to weigh under a certain amount to go to basic training. And so my recruiter called me up 2 days before I graduated high school and wanted to know if I wanted to leave that next Tuesday. So I ended up taking his offer and I left for basic training 2 days after my graduation ceremony. It was definitely like the stars had to align, because Christina was supposed to go at that time. I wasn't. So if that person hadn't failed their weight, and if I could have easily said no and I want to go on my original date, but I didn't. So that was the beginning thing that kind of helped us get to the same place. So once we got to basic training, I don't honestly remember our very first interaction. It's very overwhelming because you're put in a group with 50 other girls that you don't know, you don't recognize, you don't know names, like there's no name tags, nothing. So I honestly can't tell you the first time like I talked to her or saw her. What made me remember her face was that anytime we would be like lining up to go somewhere or getting ready to go do something, she would come up to me and she would be like, "What's your name again?" And I'd be like,
"It's Schmidt."
And I would just like look around, and I am not a huge social butterfly. I was especially introverted at that point because I didn't know anyone, not a single person, and she just would keep coming up to me like probably 5 or 6 times at least, asking me my name because she could not remember my name. I'm like,
"How hard is it to remember? It's Schmidt."
So she would walk up, she'd be like, "Hey, what was your name again?" And I'd just be like staring forward. I'd be like,
"It's Schmidt."
And that would be like the end of the conversation. Like I definitely was not, I don't know, I wasn't like super social and trying to make friends or anything. I was just trying to survive. That was like our first interaction that I can remember, was that she could not remember my name, which does not start the story off well, I feel like. I'm like, she always says that like she noticed me right away. I'm like, then why couldn't you remember my name? And I definitely knew pretty quickly that she was interested in women. Christina's definitely more outward and obvious about her sexuality than I am. Definitely people don't assume my preference. It was pretty easy to assume with her, and then she also talked about it very openly. She wasn't trying to hide it at all. She had a very strong southern accent. I remember thinking that. I'm like,
man, this girl's like a redneck.
But like I liked the accent at the same time. But it's just funny because I haven't heard a lot of accents. I had some friends from back home who had family from Arkansas, and they definitely had a strong twang, but I didn't see them all the time. But she just had an accent all the time. I'm like, how does this not fade? But I remember thinking that about her as like one of the first impressions, was that she was very strong-willed and southern and had a very strong accent. She seemed pretty badass. She was very confident in a place that most people aren't. Basic training, you're not exactly feeling yourself. She would come over to me and like come over to where my bed was on that side of the bay, because there were 2 different sides, and she would just stir up random conversations with me. And it's not like I was outwardly interested or anything. Like it wasn't like she was coming on to me in any type of way. She was very friendly. Like there was no crossing any boundaries or anything like that. I never felt like she was flirting with me or trying to do anything. It's just like she genuinely just wanted to get to know me, but I was not interested in that. So she would like come over and try to like strike up conversations, and I just remember being like,
"Yeah, hey."
Whenever she would come over. I think it's really hard for me to let new people in. I definitely give people a tough time, which I think is why all of my friends are extroverts, because they're the only ones that would probably put up with that and try to like break down those barriers. But she definitely persisted. She somehow got me to open up and be her friend. Like we would just start like talking when we were allowed to talk, because not all the time. But so she just would like try to get to know me. She would ask me questions. Typically I think it went easier, like I would just listen to her. She's definitely a talker, and so she would just tell me things about her and her background, where she came from, her family, her friends, pretty much anything under the sun, like interests, whatever. And I was pretty content just like listening, and then sometimes she'd ask me questions and I would answer, but I wasn't super open at first. Christina's definitely one of the first people that have been able to crack my shell completely in terms of getting me to open up and be vulnerable, and I think that's why we became such good friends so quickly, because there's just something about her that I can't really explain it. I just like knew in my core that I could trust her. Like, it was safe to talk to her, and so I did. I opened up a lot to her. I told her about my family, my history, where I came from, you know, things about me growing up, which Christina is 6 years older than me, so she definitely had a lot more like stories, like college stories and wild night stories and whatnot. But I told her a lot about like my family and growing up and my values and those kinds of things, and it just, I don't know, it was just so easy to talk to her, and that's not easy for me. It's not easy to be open, to be vulnerable, and to confide in people. By the end of basic training, which was 7 weeks, I felt like she knew me better than a lot of my friends that I went to high school with for like 8 years. So it was pretty crazy the way that she was able to get to know me, I guess. She would try to make herself taller in line, because when you line up to go eat, or when we would go to class, you would line up in formation and they line you up by your height. So she would like stand super tall to try and get next to me, because we're like maybe half an inch or an inch apart. So she would make herself tall to like stand or sit next to me. I just remember like, I wasn't like, I don't think I was rude to her, but I think I just like played that role of sarcastic, and so whenever she would show up like behind or next to me in formation, I would just be like,
really?
anytime. It got to the point though where I would start doing it too. I'd like hunch down a little bit so nobody would tap me to move because of my height, so we could hopefully sit together. We became such good friends so quickly, and I'm sure because we were in that environment, you're with each other 24/7. It's not like you go home and then you see them at school and then you go back home. You're with each other from like sunrise till sundown, and then you're all sleeping in the same place. So it was really easy to form deep connections very quickly there, because you're with each other for such great amounts of time. Still to this day, one of my best friends is from that flight. So Christina would do this thing where when we were on what's called EC duty, which was basically like security in the room when everyone was sleeping, we would take shifts, and sometimes you have to get up at like 3 a.m. and work till 5 a.m. It's like walking around making sure everybody's good to go, nobody's in the room that shouldn't be in the room. Christina would volunteer me for middle of the night shifts that she was on. Or she would be like, oh yeah, Schmidt will take that shift when she was going to be on it. Or she would switch with someone that was supposed to work the middle of the night shift. She'd be like, hey, I'll take your middle of the night shift. You can take mine at like 8 a.m. which is like the best shift ever. And so she would do that, and she would come over to me sometimes and be like, hey, we're on the same EC shift. And I was like,
oh really? I was like, I didn't see that on there.
And she's like, yeah, you're on like the 3 a.m. shift. And I'd be like, because let me tell you, the one thing that I hated giving up was sleep. So I would like get up and be so cranky, because you have to get into your uniform 100% and do your hair and everything, because you can't sit down, you have to stand the whole time. And I would just like stand leaning against the wall, just being so miserable, because I hate not being able to sleep. And she would just talk my ear off for 2 hours. I hated giving up sleep, but it was definitely one of the easiest ways to get to know each other, because you have nothing else to do. Yeah, she would just talk the whole time. I don't know how anybody could be awake enough to talk. One specific time I remember the best was when we went to Beast Week, which is basically like a week out in camp, kind of like camping basically. And she signed us up for the same middle of the night shift, and so we sat outside the tent while everyone was sleeping. And I remember I opened up to her about a lot of things that I hadn't told anyone before. I think it was from that point that I knew we were best friends. I never knew I had feelings for her until the very end of basic, because I have never been in a relationship with a female before. Really, I hadn't had any relationships in high school or anything. I guess I didn't recognize what those feelings were. I wasn't in denial, and it wasn't like, oh, I know I like a girl but I'm embarrassed about it. I just genuinely didn't know. I've never been ashamed of it. Once I realized it, I told the whole world like as soon as I figured it out myself. Because it progressed from such a deep friendship into feelings that were more. It was such a subtle shift that it wasn't like, it didn't click in my brain like it did for Christina. Like, Christina knew. She never acted on it. She never brought it up or anything, because that would have been inappropriate at basic. She knew, and I had no idea until we talked about it after we had graduated. Essentially, Christina got, I don't know, we got to know each other because she was so persistent, and I'm so grateful for that, because I think a lot of times being closed off can cause you to miss out on a lot of things, but she didn't allow that to happen. She just was like, we're gonna be friends, and that's what we were. It was honestly like the best time. Like, I love basic training, and I would totally go back, because I think it's the experience that I had, because I formed such a deep friendship with her, and it's just a time where you focus on nothing but getting fit and doing what people tell you, and then when they gave you free time, you just hung out with the people that you've been spending all your time with, and it was awesome. And I would totally do it again. She did not have the same experience, I know that. I wish that I could remember all of the small moments with her whatever. I know there was one time where she wrote me a letter, which it wasn't like a confession of love or anything. It was just like a letter writing to me, and she kept asking me if I'd read it and asking me if I'd read it, and I had put it in my locker, but I hadn't read it yet. I don't know why, I don't remember, but I just like,
yeah, I'll read it when I get to it.
And I didn't write her back for a few days, and she's still to this day, so like,
well, I don't know why you wouldn't read my letter.
Yeah, and then there was this thing at Basic. There was a girl that was interested in her, wanted me to give her a letter asking if she liked her back. And so I gave it to Christina, and I was like, I need you to just like tell her one way or the other, because we were friends at this point. And I think that like maybe I was starting to develop feelings, but like I said, I never acknowledged them or realized them, so it wasn't an outward thought of mine. But I just remember being annoyed that I was having to be the mediator. I was like, this is so like elementary school. But then Christina like wouldn't respond to her letter, and so the girl kept asking me like, do you know like how she feels, what she say, like blah blah blah. And so I had to keep asking Christina, I'm like, can you just like tell her one way or the other? I'm like, just tell her. I was like, I don't care what you're gonna say. But I guess Christina didn't want to hurt her feelings because she didn't reciprocate those feelings that were in the letter, so she just wasn't responding. And then I was having to hear about it every day. And I told my aunt and my mom and my grandma and everyone when they came for my graduation, I was like, yeah, I was in this like love triangle because she wanted me to give her a letter, and then she wouldn't respond, so then she kept asking me. And Jill, my aunt, was like, there's 3 points in a triangle. She's like, well, who was the other point? And so she was basically saying my family knew before I did that I was into Christina. Like when they came for graduation, we all went out to eat, like Christina and her visitors and my family, we all went out to dinner, and there were a couple other people there too, but my family was all like, yeah, we knew as soon as we saw y'all interact that there was something more there. And I was like,
how did you know that I didn't? I was like, what the heck?
And nobody said anything to me really. My mom did get a little upset at me because I wanted to go spend, like, when you graduate you get time to go off base and go do things you haven't been able to do for 2 months, so I wanted to go spend that time with Christina. And then my mom was pretty upset that like I wasn't wanting to just hang out with her, and she did bring it up. She's like, I don't care if you love a girl and blah 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 blah. And I was like,
what are you talking about? I was like, this hasn't, what? I was like, I did not love a girl.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, just all the, looking back, all the things, it's crazy. After we'd graduated, me and Christina talked, and I think at that point realizing that we weren't going to be in the same place anymore, it scared me, and because I didn't want to not be around her anymore. And I think that's when I started to realize that it was more than just friendship, and it had like turned into something else. Kind of after we graduated, she like sat me down and we talked, and she kind of told me how she felt, and it was like probably earlier that day or the day before I had realized I felt the same way. And so when she told me, I don't think she was expecting this at all, because she had no idea that I felt the same way or that I could feel the same way, because I had never had feelings for a girl before. I'm pretty sure when I told her like,
yeah, I feel the same way.
Like, I think she was pretty shook because we were like sitting on a bench when she told me, and she's just like staring at the ground when I was talking, and I feel like she couldn't look up because she was so shook. She like told me, she's like,
I got feelings for you. I'd like to try to be with you. She's like, I don't want you to ever be with anyone else.
I was like,
I feel the same way.
And I feel like her eyes were probably bulging out of her head, but we weren't like looking at each other. And she told me that day that she loved me, and I told her, I was like, I don't want to say it until I'm sure. I was like, I don't want to say something that I don't mean. And I was like, this is really new for me, so I was like, I mean, I appreciate that you say that. And I was like, I care for you a lot, but I didn't reciprocate it that day. I thought about it a lot after that, and we were like writing each other letters all the time, back and forth after that conversation. And a few days later, she asked if I would want to be her girlfriend, and I said yes. And it was really scary, but also not at the same time. Like it was I guess it wasn't scary, it was nerve-wracking, but in a good way. Like it was just different. I could tell it was different, and it was easier. I remember when I would have like crushes or people I was interested in high school, it just always felt off, and I always felt like scared or nervous about it, but in like a weird way. And I think that's because deep down I wasn't actually interested in those people. I just thought that I should be because of the society I was raised in, and the culture, basically. Like, I was definitely raised liberally. It wasn't that it was like frowned upon to be gay or to be anything like that. It was such a small town, there just wasn't the exposure. There weren't a lot of people there that were outwardly out that I knew about, and so it's not that it was like something I would have been ashamed of. It was just, there was no exposure and there was no awareness about it, so it wasn't like I considered it like,
oh, maybe I'm interested in girls.
It just wasn't, that wasn't a thought that crossed my mind at all. I don't know, I just thought I was supposed to like a boy because that's what everybody else did. But it never felt right. But when Christina asked me, like, I was nervous, but it was like excited nervous. I said yes, and we started dating, and then we jumped right into a long distance relationship from the very get-go. She went to the East Coast and I went to the West Coast for quite a few months, and then she moved to the West Coast as well. We were about 3 or 4 hours apart, and we would drive and see each other every single weekend, and the relationship progressed really quickly. I can't explain it, and I know that people didn't understand at the time, but I've never been one to make rash decisions. I feel like I am very thought out when I do things, and I try to be as responsible and wise as possible, and it didn't feel anything but that when we wanted to be together and stay together forever. Like, it didn't feel like I was rushing, didn't feel like I was jumping into anything. We had conversations about marriage and kids and what we would want our lives to look like very, very early on. I guess when you find that person that's perfect for you, in my opinion, like, I didn't have doubt. And I know that's not normal for every relationship is different, but for me, there was no doubt and there was no second guessing. I trusted her, she trusted me. That bond that we formed at basic training as best friends, it was such an easy transition into a relationship because we already knew each other so well. It was amazing, and we fell in love and we got married a few months later. Here we are almost 5 years later, and I could not be happier. We have a little baby on the way, and it's crazy to me how things have worked out, and I couldn't be more grateful that we ended up in the same flight. Like, it was definitely God's will, and I believe 100% in things that are meant to happen, and we were meant to be in the same flight, and we were meant to meet, and it's been an amazing journey. We've had an amazing life together, and that is how we met and fell in love. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or want clarification on anything, leave it in the comments. We'll definitely do more videos like this if you're interested. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video. Bye.